So now that it's project time, we need to kind of establish what the workflow is going to be for these projects. And if I just say, make a scene that looks something like that, well, that can be kind of overwhelming to know where to start. And so that's what I want to focus on today, is just taking an idea and then blocking it in and basically sketching it in 3D. All right, so we'll try to get to this point over the next couple of hours, or I guess as far as this video is concerned, it'll probably be about an hour. So a couple things before we actually start modeling. You notice I did gather some reference images, things that I liked, maybe not the whole image, but components of, color scheme, or some of the additional details like the telephone poles, like the wood frame and the stone ground, and I like the doors here and the signs that are hanging down right there. And I love the additional details here. It's just the reference image process is kind of like brainstorming, right? You're just looking for things that pique your interest, that you think are a little interesting, something that you might want to incorporate into your own project. So with all of those in mind, and I'm going to keep them on the other monitor, we can get into Maya. And this is going to be the first kind of proper project of the semester. And we want to make sure that we're staying organized with that. So you'll want to make sure that you have a new project. So you'll open up your project window and click New, enter your project name. I've already done that. So instead of creating a new project, I'm just going to go to File and Set. Whoops. I'm going to go to File and Set Project, and then make sure that I have my Cottage project selected. Click Set. Now I can save my new scene, and I already have a Cottage 01 blocking, so I'm going to have to call this something else. I'll call this 01B. Recording. Okay. All right, so I have that. That's really the only couple things I need to do. I do have my reference images saved in my project's source images folder in a references subfolder. And yeah, I think we're ready to begin. I'm not going to use any of those reference images in Maya, in that I'm not going to bring them into the scene. Right, I'm not modeling from blueprints or elevation drawings, anything like that. I'm just going to keep them open to the side as reference and inspiration. So this will be a little bit more kind of free form. So with this cottage, simple cabin, let's define the main shape, and that's going to be the body. Now, as I'm blocking and naming these objects, I like to give it a suffix of block so that I know it's a temporary version of that thing, and I can go back later and add more detail. But I don't want to add a bunch of detail right away, because if I want to change something, it's a lot easier to do it when it's in its more simple form. Okay, so I've got a cube. I'm going to call this, I'm going to say cabin because it's shorter to type. Cabin block. All right. And the proper dimensions in Maya, each Maya unit is 1 centimeter. I'm not going to use that here. It's not that vital. And if it needs to be at the end, I can always scale it up. I'm going to say that 1 Maya unit is a meter, or a yard, take your pick. But we'll say it's roughly 3 feet. So we'll have the cabin be, to start, I'm going to, in my channel box, the inputs, I'm going to set the width, we'll set to 5, and the height we'll set to 3, and the depth we'll set to 3. Okay? And I want this sitting on the grid plane, so I'm going to select it, and the translate Y I'm going to move up to 1.5. Okay? Because the height is 3, so I want to move it up halfway so that it's sitting on the ground. Okay, so there is the base of my cabin. Super exciting, I know. Now we want to figure out what that general shape is going to be. I know I want to do a little peaked roof. So I'm going to go to Edge Mode, Insert Edge Loop Tool, click on the Options box to open that up, and set multiple edge loops. I'm going to set that to 1, and then I will just click and cut it in half the long ways. Okay. And now I can grab that center edge and move that up and figure out where my roof line is going to be. Because now it's already starting to look like a house. It was that easy. Up next, I guess we can define the roof. So I'm going to take the roof faces and I'm going to separate them out. So with those faces selected, I'm going to go to Edit Mesh and Extract. It's something we haven't used before. Edit Mesh, Extract. You can see there's a couple of options. We want to separate the extracted faces. I don't want to worry about any offset. They can just stay in place where they are. Click Extract, and then you can see what it does. We've got a couple of different options. Again, I'm going to keep it at the defaults. But now it's its own object. Okay, I can rename that. And we will name this, actually go into object mode, make sure, there we go. Object mode, we're going to rename it. We'll call it roof block. Okay. Now we want to give that some thickness, some size. So go back into face mode, and I'm going to extrude the faces, and we'll just adjust the thickness, I don't know, something like that. Whatever looks good to your eye. And then I can grab, excuse me. Then I can grab these bottom faces. And I'm just going to move them down and scale them away from each other. Right, I want to keep, I'm going to side view here so you can see this a little bit better. I want to stay following the roof line of the house. So I don't want to scale them apart too far. But there we go. Just something like that, so that there's an overhang now. So then the last thing that I can do is select the end faces here and scale them away from each other. And now we've got the general shape of the roof. I think I went a little too far on the overhang down on the sides. So I'm going to move those up a little bit and scale them in. Again, we can keep an eye on the side view and make sure that we're following the pitch of the roof. There we go. Okay, so we'll call that good for now. We can always make adjustments to that later. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is start to define where doors and windows are going to be, because that's kind of, those are the main features on any building. So I'm going to go into Edge Mode and bring out my Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm going to reset it so it goes back to relative distance from edge. And here, actually, I'm going to do equal distance from edge. That's going to work better. I want to position these edge loops in a way that will work for where this door is going to be. So, as I said before, I'm kind of roughly using 1 Maya unit equals a meter. So the door I want to be between 6 and 7 feet tall. I know that's a little short for a door, but that's what I'm going to go with. So I want to add an edge loop here, and I'm going to slide it about 7 feet off the ground, something like that. Okay? And then I can add some edge loops this way and start to kind of block in where I want that to be. So maybe the door is there, and the window next to it is maybe here. Maybe something like that. Okay? And so if we look at this, the window I'm thinking would be... Oh, I got turned around. There we go. So go to face mode. This would be the door, right? These two faces, and the window would be this face. Is kind of what I'm looking at. So now, before I start removing geometry or deleting or anything like that, I'll take a step back and just look at it from a few different angles and see if that feels right. It's okay. Yeah, I think that's gonna work. Maybe I want to move the door a little bit, so I'll select the two edge loops for the door. I'm just gonna slide them over a little bit, and maybe I want the window to be a little bit taller. Okay, so I can make those little adjustments now. Now what I want to do is actually start adding some geometry for those. So first thing I'm going to start with is the door. And I want to do a rounded door. So if we look at my reference here, or what I did earlier, I've got this door frame that kind of, it's a half circle, and then I extruded it down. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to add a cylinder. We're going to call this door block. Again, naming things as soon as I add them, so I don't forget. I'm going to set my subdivisions to 8, and then I'm going to rotate it along the x-axis 90 degrees. And I'm going to add 1 subdivision to the caps. Or I set that to 2 so I actually get that ring. Okay. Now I'm going to move this out and scale it down. Okay, this is going to be the trim around the door. I can also, at this point, I can delete the back faces. I don't need them. They're not doing anything. They're just in the way at this point. So I'll just select those all. Make sure I don't have other faces accidentally selected. And hit delete. Okay. Now, on my building, I can't really see where this door is that I've already laid out, and so I'm going to turn on wireframe on shaded, which is this blue cube with the white lines in the viewport toolbar. Okay, right here. This is where we want to click, and now we can see all of our edge loops. Okay. And I'm going to do that in front view as well. Okay, so now in front view, I can take my cylinder, my door frame, and I can move it into position. So something like that. You can see that it's too big, so I need to scale that down. Whoops. I want to make sure we're scaling from the center. And actually, I don't want to adjust the thickness of this when I scale it. So instead of scaling it from the center, because you can see if I scale it from the center, it gets thinner too. I just want to scale it along the X and the Y axis so it retains its relative thickness. So I'm going to scale it to about the width of my doorway, then move it up. Okay, I'm okay if it goes a little bit above. Okay, now I can position it against the building. Okay. Now I want to define the difference between the door and the frame. So I'm going to select this edge loop that I added. And I'm going to scale that out. Okay, so there's my door frame right there, around the outside. And then I can select all the faces on the bottom and delete those. Okay, so now I just have this half circle up here. All right. Next thing, I'm going to select this bottom edge. I'm going to turn on grid snapping. I'm going to extrude it down. All right, grid snapping is not going to work. Oh, I know why. So when I double-clicked that edge, it actually selected all the way around. So I don't want that. I just want to select this bottom edge. All right, so just those bottom edges there. And then I will extrude those down to the ground. Okay. The last thing is I wanted to find the difference between the door and the frame. So I'm going to select all the faces that would be the door and just extrude those in a little bit. Whoops, turn off snapping and extrude those in a little bit. Okay, and I've got some faces down here at the bottom I don't need, so I can delete those. Okay, so there's my door. To the window. So for this window, this is the face that I want to define it. So what I'll do is I'll take this window and I'm going to just extract it, just like I did with the roof. I'm going to extract the window and then go to object mode, select that window. I'm going to move it away from the building just for now, just so I can tell them apart. We'll rename it window block. Okay. And now we can start getting that shape figured out. So I'm going to select the edges, not the face. I want to select the 4 edges around the outside. I'm going to extrude those. So I'll go shift right click, extrude, and instead of using the extrude widget that comes up, we can actually just use offset right here on the side. We'll offset a little bit, however thick I want the window trim to be. I'll go something a little bit thicker there. That's good. Now we can add some edge loops. So insert edge loop tool. I'm going to do multiple edge loops. I'm going to add 2, and then I'm going to scale them towards each other. Okay, and this is going to be the window pane dividers here. And we'll do the same thing on the vertical axis. So insert edge loop tool. Again, make sure that you have multiple edge loops selected. And then we'll scale those in. All right, and that's really all I need to do as far as adding geometry. I might have scaled it in a little too far. I want this center face to be a square. That's what I'm looking for, so something like that. Okay. So now all we have to do is a couple of extrusions. So I'm going to select this outside edge, and I will extrude it back, I don't know, that far or so. And then we can select these inside faces. I'm going to extrude those back not quite as far. Okay, and this is going to be the trim, and then I'll select just the window panes and extrude those back even further. All right. So I've got a few different levels here. I've got the thickness of the trim, the thickness of the window panes, or the dividers in the window, and then the window panes themselves are a little bit further back. Okay, so once I have that created, I can move that back into place. And there is my window frame. So the next thing that I want to add is, let's do this little half dome window here. Okay, and so the way that I'm going to do that is with a cylinder.
Can we do the flower pot?
we're calling an audible, and we're gonna cover the little window sill planter here. So the way that I did that, I'm gonna go into front view, or actually, I guess we need to stay in perspective for a moment here. Add a cube, rename it, call it window planter block. There we go. And I will move this forward and jump into front view. So I want to position that in front of the window, and I will scale it to the width of the window to roughly the right size. We can look at this in side view here too. Again, something that looks relatively close. We can always make tweaks later. That looks okay. It's probably a little bit large. So I'm going to select this front face and just move it in and move that down. Okay. And I'll position it at the bottom of the window. So now we need to make it something that plants could theoretically fit in. So we need to create a cavity. So select that top face. We're going to extrude it and just adjust the offset, so scale it in a little bit. So there's a kind of a lip or rim around the top. And then I will shift right click and extrude it once more. This time I'll just adjust the thickness and bring it down. Okay. From there, I'm going to select that bottom face as well as the bottom of the planter. And I'm going to scale them in a little bit in both directions to give it a taper, a visually appealing taper. And now we can just position it in place. So I'll move it kind of underneath the windowsill, and I think I'll rotate it a little bit, kind of like that. Something like that. It's probably rotated a little bit too far. So maybe we'll rotate that back a little bit. Again, we can get real close to the side view and make sure that's where we want it to be. And it's looking good and centered in the front view. And there's our planter. Now that we have one window and planter set done, we can take those, I can group them together. We'll call it window group. And then I'm going to duplicate the group, rotate the group 90 degrees, and move it over to the side of the building. Looks like we actually need to rotate it -90. Move it over to the other side of the building, and we'll position it. Let's see. We can go side view and wireframe. And put it right there. And now you can see on the side of the building it looks kind of ridiculously large. So maybe we want to scale that down a little bit here. Maybe we'll just make it thinner. But I want it to scale towards the center, so I'm going to, with that group selected, I'm going to go to Modify and Center Pivot, and watch where the manipulator moves. See, it goes right to the center of the window, and now I can scale it down that way. Now let's go to that little half-moon window. I'm going to start with a cylinder, and I'm going to rename it. We'll call it round window block, and I'm going to set the subdivisions to, say, 12. Should be fine. And I'm going to rotate it around the z-axis 90 degrees. Okay. Now I'm going to scale it down, move it over, get it close to in position. All right, you see right now this is a ridiculously large window. So we need to scale it down a little bit more. And again, you just think of this as kind of the sketching phase. Just getting things roughly where they should be. Okay, that's looking pretty good on the size. Now I do have a divider here, and so I want to adjust this window to make adding that divider as easy as possible, because I like to do things the easy way and the quicker way, because I'm lazy. And in this case, being lazy can be helpful. So instead of, now I know I always harp on 12 subdivisions or 8 subdivisions. You don't need a ton. But this is a case where adding a few more would actually be very helpful. So I'm going to select subdivision axis, just the word, and then middle click and drag in the viewport, and I can add additional subdivisions here. I'm going to go for a round number. We'll say 32. Let me see here. No, I think we'll go... That's straight across, but I want... Yeah, that'll be fine. 32 will work. I also want to add one more subdivision to the cap, so I'll actually set that to 2. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to go to face mode and delete all of the bottom half faces. Looks like I got a couple of extra there. I want to keep those, so I'll deselect those. And I've got some faces on the back side selected too. So I'm going to click this button right up here, which is isolate selected. Okay, that's going to hide everything else so that I can see all of this, and I'll deselect all the stuff that I don't want to delete. Okay, now I can hit delete, and I will uncheck that isolate selected button. All right, so now here is part of our window. I'm going to isolate that one more time, and I'm going to delete the back half of it. I really only need the front plane here. Okay, I just need this shape here. Now I'm going to select this inner edge and shift right click, and I'm going to slide the edge. Okay, it's right below insert edge loop. I'm going to slide that, and the way that works is you drag with the middle mouse button. Okay, so you press the scroll wheel down, and you can slide that up. And I think right about there. All right. And now, yeah, I think that'll work. Now I can delete these inside faces here. Okay, I don't remember exactly where I was with this recording, and I probably won't remember to cut out that false start. So we'll just start from 0. I've got a cylinder. I'm going to name it. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to set the subdivision caps to 2. And we can adjust the subdivisions up. I used 32 before. Whoops. That's pretty good. Yeah, that should work. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to delete all the back faces. Don't need those. I'm going to select all the bottom half faces. and delete those as well. Okay, so you can already see we're very close to this window shape. I'm going to select this inner edge loop and shift right click slide edge tool, and then middle click and drag out to about there. Okay, so this you can see is going to be the trim. Now what I need to do is delete some more faces. So I'm going to go to face mode. I'm going to delete all the interior faces there. So now I just have an arch. And I'm going to select this edge and the opposite edge, and I'm going to bridge those together. All right. And then I'm going to add a bunch of divisions to this because I want this to line up. It's probably easier to look at this in perspective. I want these to line up this way. It looks like that'll actually... 7 should work. We'll have to make a couple of adjustments, but 7 should work there. Okay. So now I want to get that interior support. So I'm going to bridge these. All right. Now I want the thickness of this kind of middle trim piece to be the same on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to turn on vertex snapping. All right, that's this third snapping icon up here. Go to vertex mode, and I'm going to snap this in line with the top. All right, so this bottom vertex, I'm going to snap and just move it just along the z-axis, right, just horizontally, and snap it in line. So now that's straight up and down. Okay. So that gets me all the trim pieces to this window. Last thing is we just need to fill in these center parts. And I'm going to do that very simply with some couple of tools. So I'm going to go to edge mode. I'm going to select that whole face loop. I'm going to select fill hole. Now that gives me an n-gon. I'm going to fix that here in a second. I just need to get the faces there. So I'm going to fill those in. Again, just double clicking on that edge and saying fill hole. Also, these edges that I added, I actually don't need. So I'm going to select them and control delete them. Again, make sure you hit control delete so you delete the vertex there too and not just the edge. But now we just need to add a couple of edges in between so that I have quads and not a big ugly n-gon. And so for this, I don't think it's in... Oh, it is. If you go to your poly modeling tool shelf, up towards the end is what looks like an X-Acto knife and a couple of line segments, right? This is your multi-cut tool. And what this allows you to do is actually add cuts wherever you want. I caution you to use this very sparingly because you can get into trouble with topology and with where your edges are. But in this case, it's actually going to be very helpful. So I'm going to add an edge right across there. I'm going to click on one vertex and the other and hit return. And that adds an edge. Okay, and I chose that because I'm looking for... I want 4 sides, right? And my grease pencil is not working. I don't know why that's... Okay, I'm trying to draw this out, but my grease pencil doesn't want to work. Okay, never mind then. I tried. I want 4 sides, so if we've got 1, 2, 3, and that'll be 4, so I'm going to go multi-cut there and there. And ultimately, I suppose, if this is just a placeholder, this doesn't really matter since it's not going to be the final geometry, and but it's just good practice. Okay, so I have my window basically defined. The last thing is just to do a couple of extrusions. So I'm going to go to face mode, select everything, but I need to deselect the window panes. Okay, I'll extrude those out. Whoa, turn off snapping. That's why my grease pencil wasn't working. Okay, so extrude that out a little bit, and then I'll deselect the center piece and extrude that out a little bit further. And there's my window. So now that I have that completed, I can go back into object mode, and I'm going to center the pivot again, so modify center pivot, and then I can just move that up into position on the building, and realize that that is too large, so to scale that down a little bit more. And there is that window. The main kind of bits of this, you know, in my reference I also have a chimney, and so to create that was another cube that I named chimney block. Move it over, and I'm going to move it up half a unit so it's sitting on the ground. And we'll scale it down and out. I'll move it up against the building. And then in face mode, we're going to take that and just kind of extrude and scale our way up to define the chimney. Now here I'm not really concerned about the intersections. When I go back and actually model this, I will model and accommodate for the chimney going through, and it won't just intersect. Right now I'm just kind of figuring out the size and where things are going to be. I also extruded an additional kind of ring here. So extrude the face. Okay, just a little bit of extra detail there. And I even extruded that down. Okay, so now I see what that looks like with the chimney. You know, maybe as I'm looking at this, I don't know, we've gotten to the part where we have the building established, and now we can start playing around with the design part of it, which is the kind of more fun part for me. Maybe you want to do like an eyelet window in the roof, so I can select this window, I can duplicate it, move it and rotate it. Oops. I want to rotate it. Nope. There we go. So maybe I'll go on the front view here for this. Maybe I'll position it over the door. Okay, because I want to see how that looks. And then what I can do is select the back edges of this. Just make sure that I have, yep, and extrude those back. Okay, and so if I want to do an eyelet window, I gotta play around with that and see if that's something that I like the look of. It may be, it may not be, but it's easy to figure out now before I spend all the time to figure out how I'm actually going to model that in a roof. In my reference, I did some corner detailing. Okay, so I'm going to add another cube, starting with a lot of cubes, but that's fine. I will call this corner stone block. And I'm going to move this out to the side here. I'm going to move it up half a unit so that's sitting on the grid floor. And let's actually move it all the way over here. I'm going to delete most of the faces. Okay, I just want these outer faces here. I'm going to select these top two edges and bring those down. And we'll bring that in and this edge in. Okay. Now we can just select those faces. I'm going to extrude those. And then just a little bit. Something like that. And then we can move that into position right up against the building. Once that's in position, and it looks like it's going to be a little bit too wide here. Okay, again, that's an easy thing to adjustment to make. I move that down there. Maybe a little bit more. Maybe I'll make it a little bit shorter too. All right, that's going to work. Now I can select that object and we can use duplicate with transform. So I'm going to duplicate it once with Command D, and I'll move it up. And then Maya's going to remember that transformation. So I can hit Shift D to duplicate again with that transform. Okay, you can also go to the Edit, Duplicate with Transform menu. It's right there, Shift D. And so I can continue playing around with these sorts of additional details and figure out what things I like and what things I don't like on this cottage model. And eventually I'll get to something that feels pretty good. There's certainly more adjustments that can be made here, but it starts to really set the scene. You know, maybe I'll block in a fence. If I want to do a well in the yard, I can kind of get that established too, and really figure out what this building and environment is going to look like.